Hello and welcome. This is Matthias 76. Together, we are decoding the deception, and we're picking up today in Daniel 11. And we are going to, today, there's a map we'll be looking at. Just a reminder that if you go out on our Daniel page on the website, there you'll find all the videos that we've done. But down at the bottom, we've got our resource center with maps and the like, and we'll be adding a map along with these others, the timelines that are here, etc. We will be adding the map that we're looking at today, so you've got access to that. You can always go out and Google Maps, not Google Maps, but you can Google a map that covers the period of time we're talking about. But as to whether it is really applicable is oftentimes hard to determine. So we're going to pick up, and we're here in Daniel 11. And let's just say this. Daniel 11 is very interesting. Daniel 11, in many ways, it can be said, doesn't have a great deal of application to our situation today. Daniel 11 is interesting because it is the most specific. It is the most specific prophecy in all of the Old Testament. It is just loaded with detail, but it's loaded with detail about a period of time that we know very little about, that we are not really familiar with. It is a period of time that in many ways, modern history, meaning modern man's take on history, looking back on history, it gets skipped over. We talk a lot about Alexander the Great. We don't talk a lot about what happened after Alexander the Great, because the emphasis in our worldview then shifts to Rome. Okay? That's kind of our timeline for things, and it's not inaccurate. But what went on with the successors of Alexander the Great gets kind of pushed to the side, because it is not, for Western history, it is not as important. And that's not really true either, because it's vitally important in many ways. We're just not aware of it. So I'm popping up this map. This map is the map. It's interesting in a number of ways. If you look at it, here's the Mediterranean. So here's what is today Greece over here, okay? All of this that is colored in red, green, brown, purple, all of this, all the way over to here. See this? That's India. All the way over to here was conquered by Alexander the Great. And he did it in just a few years. Incredibly, incredibly impressive. And this is all of great importance and significance, because Alexander and then his successors instituted something called Hellenization. Hellenization. Hellen is what they called Greece. They Greekified everything. They made everyone under their dominion learn Greek. The New Testament is written in Greek. It's written in Greek for a reason, because that was the language that the whole world then spoke. That in itself is vitally important to the spread of the gospel. It's a key component in what Paul was talking about in Galatians 4:4, that when the time had fully come, God sent forth his son, born of a woman. The combination of what Alexander the Great did and then what the Romans did after that paved the way for the spread and dissemination of the gospel and the reclaiming of the nations. All important. Now, the thing is, as is always the case with history, history is a bloody thing. When you look at this period of history that this chapter of Daniel covers, we're looking at a period of time of about 400 years. And the whole thing was battle and conflict. And when you read through it, and I'll say this too, we're not going to read this whole chapter today. I'm not going to read it out to you. It's also the longest chapter in Daniel. And if I read it, I would probably bore you, because the level of detail that I would have to go into to tell you who is who, you'd shut me off. You'd say, oh, wow, that's really interesting. And you'd go do something else. Okay. We want to take away the big points here in what happens. And I'm not saying don't read it. I encourage you, pause right now, pop open YouVersion and listen to it. And when you listen to it, keep this in mind. When Alexander the Great died, he had two sons. Yeah, they got killed. They got assassinated in the power play that took place. And his four top generals ended up dividing his empire. And if you look carefully at this map that's on the screen now, you'll see four colors. You see green, that's the biggest chunk, territory-wise. You see brown, you see purple, and you see red. For the purposes of Daniel 11, the brown, Greece, and the purple, they don't matter. The two generals who took that don't play a part in this. It's all between these two sides. You've got the king of the south. Down here, they were called the Ptolemies. The Ptolemies. The first general was Ptolemy, and then all of his descendants, and all of the wrangling and infighting and political maneuvering and manipulation that went on after him, they all bore that title, Ptolemy. Okay. Up here, this great big section, they called it Syria. It was the Seleucids. The Seleucids, kings of the north, king of the south, king of the north, king of the south. And the reason this is so important is the angel, the messenger, who is Jesus, who is telling Daniel all about this. This is vitally important to them, because what's between north and south? Palestine, Israel, all of this fighting that was going to go on, all of this playing out of history, the military engagements between the north and the south, it all came right through here. It all came through where Daniel's people were at this time back in Jerusalem trying to rebuild the temple. Remember, that's how this started. Daniel was upset about how things were being stalled and had been, the plans had been frustrated by political maneuverings of people in Samaria playing games with the Persian kings, etc. That's what started all of this. But then the Lord gives Daniel this very detailed vision, so detailed that people who don't believe the Bible is written by inspiration, that God moved men like Daniel to write it, and they were carried along by him in what they wrote, and that they were able to see the future because God knows the future. This is so detailed that what we call liberal Bible scholars, those who do not believe in the inerrancy and inspiration of Scripture, they say that this was all written after the fact because it's so detailed. They say that about a lot of the prophecies in Scripture, but this is so detailed. They say it was written after the fact, and basically it purports to be prophetic, and it is not. But if something purports to be prophetic but isn't, then what it is pathetic. and I don't want to have anything to do with it. But that's not the way this works. God does see the future. God knows the future. Everything is written down as far as he is concerned because he knows what's going to happen. And he shared it with Daniel. Why? Why? Daniel had been very upset. He's still very upset. He's going to have to be reassured and physically built up by the Lord to be able to receive all of this. And yet, at the end, this stuff always wipes him out. We see John being overwhelmed by the things he saw in the book of Revelation. What we take away from that is this. This wasn't like he was watching it on an 84-inch plasma screen, high def, 4K or 8K. It was very real in how he saw it. Maybe it was because it was the Lord himself who was telling it to him. It had a powerful impact. Another thought on all of this, talking about it having a powerful impact. We deceive ourselves, we delude ourselves into thinking that we wished we knew what history, how it was going to play out. You know what my response to that is? And part of that is just a function of age and experience, but even more, it is a result of studying the Word of God and seeing how history plays out and understanding that it's all under the Lord's control. My response to thinking, to my own inclination toward thinking I'd like to know how things play out. I want to know how. No, I don't. No, I don't. This stuff blew Daniel away. It freaked him out. It overwhelmed him. History is not pretty. And when we look through Daniel 11, it's this battle, this manipulation, this marriage for the sake of political alliance that didn't work out, that then these two kings are sitting at a table together lying to each other. Man, if that doesn't sound like politics. They're sitting at a table lying to each other, neither one trusting the other, and all the while bloodshed. It is the history of the world. You know, there are these things on YouTube that you can see that are like the history of Europe on a map, just how things change with political control because of war over a period of how many ever 100 years. And if you watch it and you think about how that all played out, the toll that it took in deaths, in suffering, in misery. And here's the big thing about war. You know where in what group demographic the majority of casualties of war come? It's not the soldiers. It's not the soldiers. In World War II, the best estimates say that somewhere in the vicinity of 70, listen to this number, 70 to 80 million people died. 70 to 80 million people died. Do you know what percentage of that was non-combatants? About 90. About 90% of that was non-combatants. Translate civilians, women, children, old people, kids. War is a terrible, terrible thing. And whether you're looking at this little slice of the world right here in Palestine and the battles raging back and forth across, and just because we need the reminder, because when it comes to geography and workings of the world, we in the Western world, and especially us Americans, tend to be fairly ignorant. There's a reason nobody holds this down here, because nobody could live there. That was Arabia. That was just the desert. It's still that way today. Not many people live here, just around the edges of it, the Red Sea, Gulf of Aqaba, etc. All the fighting took place right through here, okay? It's the same as what up over here played out in Europe. It's what's played out in Africa. It's what's played out all over the world, throughout history, throughout time. Men butcher each other. for the sake of gain. No one is ever just happy to say, oh, I've got all this. Look at what the Seleucids had. Look at this vast swath of the world that they knew that they controlled. And guess what? It wasn't enough. They wanted more. They wanted more because those, the powers and principalities, the lords of darkness who rule this world, love blood. They love death and they desire carnage. And so they are always stirring up those who do their bidding to war. This map, as I said, is going to be out on the website, so you'll be able to go out and look at it and make reference to it. Okay, the chapter break here with chapter 11 is a little bit odd because it just jumps from basically, let's put it this way, verse 1 should be with chapter 10. It's just the way it breaks down. And as for me, the first year of Darius the Mede, I stood up to confirm and strengthen him. That's still the angel talking about the way things were going. Remember the fighting with the prince of Persia and Michael coming and helping, etc. All of that, you need to go back to chapter 10 and watch that video. Verse 2, and like I said, I'm not going to read all of this. I've been working on this for some time and trying to figure out the best way to present it. So what I'm going to do is give a little bit of a sample of different sections, and we'll just play it by ear from there. And now I will show you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings shall arise in Persia. Still talking about Persia. That is who was ruling where Daniel was a retired government official. And the 4th shall be far richer than all of them. And when he has become strong through his riches, he shall stir up all against the kingdom of Greece. Okay, so now we're talking Xerxes. If you've seen 300, that guy, he goes and he attacks. His father had attacked Greece. They're always trying to expand. That keeps going on. And finally, Alexander has had enough when he's the young king and has taken over and he romps and stomps. That's verse 3. Then a mighty king shall arise who shall rule with great dominion and do as he wills. And as soon as he is arisen, his kingdom shall be broken and divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, but not to his posterity. Remember, I told you, this is Alexander the Great. It's the life of Alexander the Great and his conquest is really very short because he died so young. He partied himself to death, lived a debaucherous existence, and died at a very early age after he'd conquered all that stuff that I just put up on the screen. We'll put it there again. After he'd conquered all this, boom, he up and died. His 2 sons get killed, not to his posterity. They didn't get all of this. And if he was only 32, 33, how old could his kids be? Yeah, they didn't stand a chance. The generals were going to play political games. Those kids were going to get wiped out, and they were going to take over. So it will be divided toward the 4 winds of heaven. North, south, east, west, the 4 points of the compass, but not to his posterity, but according to the authority with which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up and go to others besides these. So a whole lot of history right there summed up in just a few sentences. Now with verse 5 and following, we get into this stuff about the fighting between the king of the south, Ptolemies, and the Seleucids, the king of the north, the kings of the north. Another key thing here, and I highly recommend go read through all of this because it reads like a political soap opera. It reads like the history of any place in the world. Just the names are changed to protect the not so innocent, right? You can plug the manipulations and machinations and wranglings and war from any place in the world, pretty much the same story. It's the same thing again and again and again. God is showing this to Daniel so that the children of Israel, as they're going back to the promised land here in Daniel 11, it's called the beautiful land. As they go back there, they're not taken surprise by all this stuff. And maybe right there, if there's one thing that if there's nothing else that we take away from our study here in Daniel 11, which isn't really so much a study as a synopsis and overview, it would be this: God doesn't want you to be surprised. He doesn't want you caught unaware. The violence, the warfare, the attacks against God's people are always going to go on. Why? Because you're with the Lord. They're with the Lord. Who rules this world? Who holds sway over the 70 nations? Yeah, Satan. Satan. This world is under his dominion for now. Okay, so we're going to be under attack. The children of Israel, they were under attack. It was going to be that way. We're going to see that with Antiochus Epiphanes, which we're getting to here today. I haven't talked about that yet. The Antichrist in the Old Testament, Antiochus Epiphanes. The Lord doesn't want us to be surprised. And here's perspective. Perspective. It is right after wisdom. Perspective might be the most important thing you can have. Where in the Bible does it ever say it's going to be easy? Where does it say that because we're the children of God, everything's always wonderful and comfortable and easy? It doesn't. Jesus said, if they did these things while I'm here, what are they going to do after I'm gone? If they do this while the tree is green, what will they do when it is brown? It's not going to stop. They're going to keep coming. And if you just look at the things that transpired right after Christ's ministry, after he was murdered, after he was executed, and then rose from the dead, it tells us in the book of Revelation that there was a great war in heaven. And Satan was cast down to earth. And he right away went after the church, after the other children of the woman, right? Right away, chases after him, but he doesn't get them all. We see that played out in the early part of the book of Acts. And then what does he do? Big picture, high level view. This stuff is very, very important. He had tried to wipe the church out while it was young, just like Herod tried to wipe out Jesus while he was a baby. Why? Because it's easy to kill babies. It's not easy to kill the King of Kings and Lord of Lords who's going to displace you, right? So Satan came, chased after the woman, chased after her other offspring, but it says the earth helped them, okay? Really interesting stuff. But then what does Satan do? He stands on the shore of the sea, and the beast from the sea comes forth with 7 heads and 10 horns. And then the beast from the earth, the Antichrist, the false prophet, looks like a lamb, speaks like a dragon, has 2 horns. The Antichrist comes. He looks for allies. He creates allies to carry on his warfare against the church. Now, if that is the high-level view of history as regards the church, then where do we get this nonsensical notion that everything's supposed to be nice and easy because we're believers? That's the deception of Satan. It doesn't come from the Lord. He says, be ready. He says, don't be deceived. He says, stand firm. He says, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. So that and put on the full armor of God, so that having done everything, you can stand. Right there, where he also talks about, for our warfare is not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities in the heavenly realm. All of this scary, nasty stuff. Buckle up, strap up, armor up spiritually, because it's coming. It's coming. So why does the Lord give Daniel all of this vision about what's going to transpire? So that they're not caught unawares, so that they understand it's going to be hard. It's going to be tough. What Antiochus Epiphanes did to the Jews, he killed, some estimates are 100,000 of them. 80 to 100,000 Jews he killed, the Antichrist in the Old Testament. Perspective. Perspective is informed by wisdom, but it also gives wisdom. What are your expectations? What do you think is going to happen? And are you ready? These are big, high-level takeaways that we can gain from what goes on here in Daniel 11. Then the king of the south, Ptolemies, Egypt, the king of the south shall be strong, but one of his princes shall be stronger than he and shall rule, and his authority shall be a great authority. After some years, they shall make an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement, but she shall not retain the strength of her arm, and he and his arm shall not endure, but she shall be given up, and her attendants who fathered her, and he who supported her in those times. Now, there's a huge backstory to all of that. Marriage of political alliance and it not playing out, and then people being murdered and executed as a result. And their names don't really matter. I forget them as soon as I read them because I'm not a history buff on the Ptolemies and the Seleucids. So we've got all this stuff that goes on and on and on. And it's just hundreds of years of battles, conflict, maneuverings played out again and again and again. And I want to get down. Let me find my place here. You see here, because I mentioned it before, but he who comes against him shall do as he wills, and none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land with destruction in his hand. That's the way the promised land is referred to here in Daniel 11. So you've got kings coming and going, and where it's really going to focus in is the kings of the north, because that was the Seleucids, and that's where Antiochus Epiphanes, that's his kingdom, okay? Verse 21, in his place shall arise, and this is one guy had gotten done away with, and Rome is playing a part in all of this, and in the power plays that are taking place, and one of the Seleucids being basically held captive by Rome. And this guy sneaks in power. He wasn't even really part of the royal line per se. In his place shall arise a contemptible person to whom royal majesty has not been given. He wasn't part of the royal line, but he took power. And he shall come in without warning and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. Armies shall be utterly swept away before him and broken, even the prince of the covenant. Now, this, even the prince of the covenant, that sounds like a juicy tidbit, doesn't it? We ought to be able to latch onto that and get some really good stuff. What's that talking about? Who is the prince of the covenant? And you can read and you can study and you can look at different historians and theologians' take on this. And the answer is you can't be sure who that is. We just don't know. We just don't know. So we just pass it on by and say, okay, we can't nail that down and know who it was. But what I want to get down to, verse 28, and he shall return to his land with great wealth, but his heart shall be set against the holy covenant. Antiochus Epiphanes had gone down. He fought 4 different times with the Ptolemies down toward Egypt. He got defeated. He took some treasure, booty, etc., and they had to head back. But when he came back, he was going to take out his frustrations, it would seem, on Israel, on Jerusalem. And we'll read here. At the time appointed, he shall return and come into the south, but it shall not be this time as it was before. For ships of Kittim shall come against him, and he shall be afraid and withdraw. That's the Romans. They came in and basically said, no more of this. You're not going down there and attacking. Get out of here. And he wasn't going to cross the Romans. They were very much on the rise and a coming power. And so he headed home. And shall turn back and be enraged and take action against the holy covenant. He shall turn back and pay attention to those who forsook the holy covenant. Forces from him shall appear and profane the temple and fortress, and shall take away the regular burnt offering, and they shall set up the abomination that makes desolate. Antiochus Epiphanes did things like, well, he slaughtered a whole bunch of Jews. He took out his wrath on them. He really hated the God of Israel. And in the temple that at this point Daniel was hoping was going to get rebuilt sooner than later, Antiochus Epiphanes set up an altar to Zeus in the temple. And he sacrificed a pig on the altar. Okay. Real low point. That's why this guy is known as the Antichrist in the Old Testament. And he was a type, a foreshadowing of the kind of things that the Antichrist would do, because anti, the preposition anti in Greek, doesn't just mean against. That's what we think of, that he's Antichrist, he's against Christ. It also means in the place of. And the Antichrist takes Christ's place. He says, he's the Lord high God of all things, and there is no salvation without him. Okay. So you've got this foreshadowing with Antiochus Epiphanes of the Antichrist who is to come. And in this chapter, it's going to do that, what I call prophecy vision thing, where it's talking about one thing, and then, like a rock skipping across the lake of history, it's going to just skip from one thing, Antiochus Epiphanes, on to the Antichrist at the end of time. "36. And the king shall do as he wills. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god," which is what Antiochus Epiphanes did. He set himself up as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He actually used those words about himself. "And he shall speak astonishing things against the God of gods," Yahweh, the true God. So you got all that going on. Let's see. I want to get down to where it starts to talk about with verse 36. We're at that point of transition where it's skipping from Antiochus Epiphanes to also talking about the Antichrist who is to come. Now, what is the Antichrist? The Antichrist is a term that John uses, and it is, but interestingly, it is not used in the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation doesn't have the title Antichrist. There, he's called the beast of the earth, and he's called the false prophet. Okay. So with verse 36 and going forward, it's jumping ahead, looking ahead to the Antichrist who will come. So let's just read through and see what it says. And the king shall do as he wills. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak astonishing things against the God of gods. Now, in the video that we did in Revelation on the beast from the earth, we said that this is the Pope. Presently, in this world, it is the Pope. The Pope says, talking about shall speak astonishing things against the God of gods. The Pope says you can't be saved without him. The papacy and the Roman Catholic official doctrine, I'm not saying this about all the people within the Catholic Church, because it certainly isn't the case. But it says that if you believe that you are saved by Jesus Christ alone, through faith in him, by grace, in his saving work, that you're damned to hell for all eternity. Anathema said. That's some pretty heavy duty stuff. So the papacy is, at this point in time, the office of the Antichrist. It's been going on for a long time. It will continue to go on. You watch my videos on Revelation 13, and you'll see that I think that it's going to transition to something bigger, greater than what the Pope is right now. He's a placeholder. Go watch those videos. He shall prosper till the indignation is accomplished, for what is decreed shall be done. He shall pay no attention to the gods of his fathers, or to the one beloved by women. That pointing to the fact that the Roman Catholic Church forbids its priests to be married, taking God's order of things and turning it into something else. And we see where inevitably in history that is gone, plays out all the time, and we see it, but nothing changes. And he shall not pay attention to any other god, for he shall magnify himself above all. The papacy is perfectly happy to have all of these other religious leaders of the world come and fawn before him. And they do, quite interestingly. They come and they basically bow down before him and put themselves under his authority. Why? Why? Not because he's the guy that he is, whoever it is right now, the guy from South America who is the Pope, but it's the office of the Pope, and he is doing the bidding of his master. And part of the big deception of it all is he looks like a lamb. He's within the church, but he speaks like a dragon. And he shall honor the God of fortresses instead of these, a God whom his fathers did not know. It's not what the church was supposed to be. He shall honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and costly gifts. Most people don't know that the Vatican is its own state. It is its own state, and it is a major political player in the political wranglings and all of what goes on in the world. It is also incredibly wealthy beyond the dreams of avarice, all of the treasures that the papacy holds, just like the Queen of England. And he shall deal with the strongest fortresses with the help of a foreign god. Those who acknowledge him, he shall load with honor. He shall make them rulers over many, and shall divide the land for a price. He's a major political player. And the God that he is serving is not the God that he pretends to serve, which is why the Vatican is full of all kinds of Egyptology, all of those gods. It's why he wears a hat that looks like a fish mouth, all kinds of weird stuff we don't have time to go into. And at the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, but the king of the north shall rush upon him like a whirlwind with chariots and horsemen and with many ships, and he shall come into the countries and shall overflow and pass through. He shall come into the glorious land. Now, exactly what this is talking about, high level view, we can't be sure, but it can simply be seen as a summation of a whole lot of history and political wranglings and power playing going on, because the papacy has, been around for a really long time. But what is here the glorious land? There's a lot of confusion that happens in Christianity about the temple. People thinking that the temple is going to be rebuilt in Jerusalem. Whether it is or whether it isn't doesn't matter to me at all. There are all kinds of things that can point different ways on that. But the New Testament makes it quite clear that the temple is now the church. It's not that building. That building was forsaken. That building was destroyed, and the real Israel is now the church, and we are his temple. So, in the same way, the church, the hearts of believers, is also the promised land, the glorious land, Zion. It is believers. And where does the Antichrist dwell? He's in the place of Christ within the church, the biggest part of the church, Roman Catholicism. So he shall come into the glorious land, and tens of thousands shall fall. The tale of the bloodiness of Roman Catholicism. Go read Fox's Book of Martyrs. All the people have been butchered because they held fast to the truth of the gospel and wouldn't give in to Rome. It's a bloody tale. But these shall be delivered out of his hand. Okay. We're just going to skip to the end because there's all this different stuff. There are parts that don't come under his power, but they don't need to come under his power. Why? Does Islam need to come under the power of the papacy, the Antichrist? No. Why? Because they're already serving the other side. He doesn't need to have dominion over them in the same way. And that's what it's talking about with Moab and all that stuff. And he shall pitch his palatial tents between the sea and the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end with none to help him. And when you look in the book of Revelation and how it talks about the end of the dragon and the false prophet and all of that, it's just boom, it's over and done. Once the Lord says it's over, it's over. And there's nothing that they can do to stand against him. They're thrown in the lake of fire, and that's it. Yet he shall come to his end with none to help him. When he's judged, and that's it. Now, unlike many times when I get done with a chapter of a book and I'm teaching, I feel like, man, okay, I got everything covered. It's been kind of shotgun because there's so much here, and a lot of it is about history that we don't know a lot about. The part that talks about the Antichrist is a little bit cryptic and veiled in how it's talked about. So it's kind of hard. It's hard to just wrap up and put a bow on it. But on that note, I will remind you of something that I have said many times. When it comes to prophecy about the end times, when it comes to looking ahead to what might come and studying the book of Revelation, especially in trying to understand it, I think that we all need to make sure that we're in the Word, we're letting it speak to us, enlighten us, and open to how these things might play out in the future. But if I'm not familiar with what the book says, if I'm not familiar with its warnings and trying to make application with them to the world as I see it, then it's easy for me to be deceived. It's easy for me to be led astray. So my advice, and I do it myself, read the book of Revelation regularly. Read the other prophetic passages of Scripture regularly. Ask God to enlighten you, to give you wisdom, perspective, understanding, so that if a time comes when we see a different application to these passages than what we see now, that our minds are ready to receive it, to apply it, because it's all about remaining faithful and making sure that we are not deceived. All right, we're going to stop there. We've got one more chapter of Daniel to go, and then we got to figure out what we're going to do next for our 1 hour weekly session. I want to thank you for listening. Please hit that thumbs up button. It does make a difference. Invite you while you're down there, subscribe. And when you subscribe, make sure and hit that notification bell so you're made aware when we put out a video. Share this video with others. Share all our teachings with other people. And finally, do drop by and pay us a visit at our resource center, decodingthedeception.com. This is Matthias 76. Together, we are decoding the deception. God bless and have a great day.